Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Impactful Teamwork. So, super excited to be back with you again today. And today, I wanted to just touch on a topic that I've really been doing a lot of research about over the Christmas holiday, and that is AI. And it seems to be the topic that's on everybody's tongue. And I don't know about you, but I keep seeing people keep offering me these custom AIs everywhere. And so I've really been delving into what is the impact of AI in business and how can we be using it to improve our own performance. And it's been a really interesting journey in terms of everything that I've unpacked and researched. So I just wanted to share some of those key findings with you today. And next week, I will be back with another interesting guest. So I hope you've been enjoying those too. But let's just start and kick off with a question. As we all know, AI can now write emails, build strategies, it can analyze data, right? It can schedule meetings, it can even coach conversations. I've got AI bots doing all kinds of different things. If we start thinking about that, what exactly are we humans going to do for work right now? And I know there's a lot of people out there really concerned that AI is going to go and take over their jobs. But I think this is what's really important to understand is that AI is going to do the repetitive jobs. It's not going to be able to create true connection with people. So the one thing it's not going to be able to replace is your vitality, your authenticity, your irreplaceable life force energy, and it's that makes you truly indispensable. Because here is what I'm seeing everywhere. Every time I talk to leaders, their teams are really busy. The leaders are super stretched. In many cases, the leaders have become the bottleneck in the business. And organizations are investing more and more in tools than ever before. And yet, despite all of this, what I still observe is energy leaking out of the system. Trust feels really fragile, and momentum is even harder to sustain. So actually, this isn't a technology problem. It's a leadership and energy problem that we've got going on that's hidden under the guise of technology in the terms of AI. So what I want to do today is explore a distinction that I believe is absolutely critical for the future of teamwork. And this is adapted from some of the work that I've been reading from Daniel Priestley. I've been following Daniel for a long time. He's got a lot of really amazing tools and thoughts in his toolkit. And what we really want to talk about today is the difference between functionality and vitality. Because I think what we're really seeing now, and this is a real crux in leadership, is AI is really forcing us to answer the question that we've been avoiding for a long time, which is, as leaders, are we leading humans or are we managing tasks? Because actually, as leaders, we need to be leading humans and not managing the tasks. So why does this matter right now? We're all very clear that AI is rapidly absorbing functional work, the tasks that are repeatable, predictable, heavy process, that someone has to do at work. And what I see in many teams is this tension going on. More output results in less meaning, more speed results in less clarity, and more efficiency is less energy. And the problem we've got going on in organizations right now is leaders are still organizing teams around doing rather than contributing. And the teams feel it. They feel like cogs in a really fast moving machine rather than humans in a living system. Because the way that we were all brought up was to do functional tasks, to execute tasks. This is functional type work. If we think about the industrial era, that's all people did. They were on the production line doing a functional task, either creating some product or adding something to a product or cutting it up or whatever. But everything was very functional. And therefore, humans were measured by what we did, how many widgets we produced an hour. That was the way that people used to get remunerated. And therefore, the value of people came from how much we did. The more widgets that we cut or the more widgets we produced, the more money we made. But this is the new reality. And the new reality says that vitality is this life force, this irreplaceable contribution. And therefore, humans are now getting valued for what they generate. So, for example, insights, connection, energy, direction. And this distinction is really important. So in the old days, it was this kind of functional executing task. This is how we got measured. So that's how the value came from. And in this new AI era, our value is coming from the things we generate, insight, connection, energy. And that's so important that we understand that when we're working with our teams. So let's just have a look at this absolutely core shift that is going on in business right now. So what is this functionality? Functionality is task-based, replicable, predictable, done by systems or AI first. And this is where a lot of people are getting concerned because this is where many roles will, I think, naturally evaporate or become obsolete because they will be done by AI. And this could be things like data entry, scheduling, editing, research, for example, writing reports, even basic strategy synthesis. This is all the domain of AI. And AI can do this stuff with so much speed and scale and consistency. I think about when I was at university doing my dissertations, right? And the internet was just beginning to come into play, but only just. And so you had to go down to the library, you had to find all the books, you had to pull them off the shelves, you had to read them all, you had to find all the information, distill it out, and then use that to write your dissertation. Nowadays, you can just go into AI, ChatGPT, Perplexity, whatever your AI tool is that you're using, and it can do that research in a matter of minutes for you. I think about how many hours I spent in the library at university finding all of this information and pulling it all together. So this is where AI is great at this kind of functionality about pulling information from multiple sources together really quickly. And so what is vitality? Vitality is life force energy, and this is irreplaceable. It's all about initiating change and energizing people and creating meaning and narrative. And this is the stuff that machines can't do. So, how's vitality showing up for our team members? It's in telling stories that shift culture. It's coming up with inspiring visions that enroll the teams to the same page. It's about creating insight that sparks movement. It's about creating human connection because remember, AI can't feel or anchor anything like that. And it's about raising belief and momentum. So vitality, it could be summed up by it's about things like initiative, judgment, meaning making, trust building, courageous decision making, and the ability to move people, not just processes. So here's a thought that I'd like to leave with you is that AI can do the work, but it's humans that create the movement. And I think when I'm looking at teams right now, teams aren't breaking down because they lack the tools to do the job. They're breaking down because this vitality is getting drained away. And it's getting drained away through confusion and fear and misalignment, unspoken tension, or leadership that is stuck in that task mode. But when vitality turns up in a group of people, it pulls them into a coherent team that is super productive and super effective. So why does this vitality matter in the AI era? It matters because AI is going to shrink the value of functional work towards zero. because, as I said, it does it faster, cheaper, and more consistently. So as humans, we need to focus on what can't be automated. So I'd like to take you back to the Stoics, because this conversation about vitality and functionality isn't a new conversation. This is a conversation that has been around for a long time. It's ancient wisdom, but how do we apply it to modern teams? Because 2000 years ago, the Stoics were asking this question: what makes a human valuable when circumstances change? And they landed on 4 virtues. And so these 4 virtues were wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. And we'll examine those in a moment. So the Stoics were really asking 2000 years ago, how do we live well in uncertainty? Whereas the question currently now being asked is, how do people remain valuable in an era of disruption? And this is what translates into modern teamwork. So let's just look at these 4 attributes right now. Wisdom. The Stoic meaning of this was about seeing reality clearly, knowing what matters, and acting with. And I think what today wisdom is talking about is knowing what the human should still do when machines can do everything else. Because, as I said, humans are providing judgment, sense making, framing, and insight. So this is why human beings have got to own the kind of vision, the intent, the questions, the beginning of projects, and also the end of projects, the meaning, the interpretation, and the decisions. Because this vitality is applied wisdom, not information. So how does wisdom show up in teams? It's about clear priorities, clear decisions, clear direction. So wisdom is all about asking better questions at the outset. The second attribute the Stoics came up with was courage. And the Stoic meaning of courage was acting right despite fear, discomfort, or risk. And I think in today's world, courage is about stepping out of functional safety and into visible leadership. Because AI rewards predictability, compliance, and efficiency, but human beings are needed for this initiative, creativity, conviction, and saying this matters maybe before there's proof. And vitality requires courage, because you can't hide behind tasks. You've got to stand for something, and you must initiate and not react. So a thought for you is, if your role could be fully automated, courage is about redesigning it before somebody else does. So when we're courageous, we have this initiative, we speak before we've got certainty, and we stand for something. And teams are borrowing courage from leaders. And we've seen this before. If the leader hesitates, the team freezes. If the leader steps forward, the energy moves forward. That third dimension the Stoics had was justice. And for Stoics, that meant fairness, contribution to the common good, and right relationship with others. And I think in today's world, justice really means value creation beyond self-interest. So we often talk about the me versus we economy. Justice is about how do we create value for everybody rather than just value for me. So it's about making yourself useful to others, creating leverage that benefits the ecosystem, and becoming a key person of influence because you elevate the outcomes for many. So this vitality isn't ego energy, it's relational energy. Because as humans, we've got to steward trust, ethics, and shared leadership. So really, I think as a leader, we're thinking about, in terms of justice, how does the use of AI amplify people or diminish them? Because justice is about contribution to the whole. And when we've got justice, we have high trust teams that outperform every time, not because they're nicer, but because they move faster, argue better, and recover quicker. because only humans can steward trust. AI currently can't build relationships, it can't steward trust. And the fourth area the Stoics talked about was temperance. And their meaning was a meaning of self-regulation, restraint, balance, and not being ruled by impulse. And I think in today's world, temperance is about resisting the trap of productivity addiction. Because AI is making it tempting to do more, produce things faster, and fill every gap with output. But the interesting thing is that vitality lives in the space, the reflection, the presence, the energy management. So we need to be careful, because if we have too much functionality, this can kill the vitality. So we need to really think about AI is giving us back more time, but we have to be careful that we don't use this time to just get into busyness, but we actually using this time effectively for deeper contribution. Because without temperance, the efficiency turns into burnout. So vitality is virtue in action inside a modern organization. And one of the things I really want to say about this temperance is, and why I think these four attributes are so important, is that AI can create so many things for us. We've talked about, it can create blog posts, it can do calculations, it can do research. And it can be very tempting just to put some commands into your AI platform and get a document out. But what we're seeing is a number of these documents become quite generic because they are missing the 20% that makes them human. If we think about Pareto's law, the 80-20 law, I'd like you to think about AI doing 80% of the work and you doing the 20% of the work to make everything more humanized, to have more feeling, to bring into stories that bring everything alive. AI can do a lot of work for us and really help us, but if we just use it in that plain vanilla sense, it's not going to help move your business forward. It's not going to connect with your clients. You're not going to have the amazing results you want. Daniel Priestley provides a really interesting model of this, and I'd like you to think about this as a scale of 1 to 10. So what he says is that wisdom and courage are number 1 and 2 on this spectrum. 3 through 8 is all the functionality, and then 9 is justice, and 10 is temperance. So you can see here how this 1 and 2, this wisdom and courage, they're what the humans need to do at the beginning of the projects to get things working. Then we have the functionality, and then at the end, we have the justice and the temperance kicking in, which is how we interpret how the project has gone. We make adaptations and changes to go again. And Daniel Priestley provides some really interesting insight on this piece in the middle, this functionality. So the areas 3 through 8. And he really says there's 3 components that you need in order to create the functionality. And he describes it like a Venn diagram, which I think is really interesting. And the 3 components are intellectual property. So this is the human wisdom layer that we're putting in. So this is our thinking, our frameworks, our point of view, our decision rules. And it answers the questions like, what should be done? Why does it matter? What does good look like? And we've got to remember that AI has no original IP. It only remembers and recombines what already exists. So when we're creating and working with AI, we need to be putting in our own IP into our AI systems. Now, a caveat against that, you want to protect your IP, and you can do that by ensuring that you don't allow your IP to be used by the AI mechanisms to improve their own knowledge. So I'd strongly recommend you do that. You can do that in ChatGPT. You can do it in a lot of the other models as well, because your IP is what's going to help you create that functionality for you and your business that your team members can use. So, for example, in my business, some of my IP is my unbridled teamship roadmap, the futures model, my energy philosophy, my books, Unbridled Success, Unbridled Business, my unique perspective on seeing teams as a living system, some of the ways I look about energy within business. That's some of my IP that I will use to help create that functionality. For example, within ChatGPT, I've been training ChatGPT on my IP so it can help me write blogs that are more written from my voice and my thinking and my philosophy. And this is why sometimes it becomes quite difficult to actually outsource things like now social media to a VA because they don't have your intellectual property in it. The second area of the Venn diagram is UX, the user experience. And this is really empathy made practical. So this is about how humans interact with the system, how intuitive it feels, how safe, simple, or energizing it can be to use. So again, this is something that needs human interaction because AI doesn't understand our frustrations or our fear or our confusion or our overwhelm. So it's just going to create something that thinks that works. But actually, and in one of my old corporate roles, I did a lot of user design, user interface. And you've actually got to go in and put yourself into the space of the user to see how the tech works. Because we need to ensure that this functionality works effectively, meets the needs of our customers. Otherwise, people aren't going to use it. So the user experience is typically happens where we've got where the care meets design, where trust meets the interfaces, and where psychology meets practicality. Because no matter how clever AI is, it's not really going to understand how the user is experiencing things in the moment, and therefore whether the user experience is broken or is it where it's effective. And the third pillar that Daniel Priestley talks about is the local language model. And this is the engine room. And this is the actual AI itself. It's the processing power. It's the pattern recognition. It's the execution layer. And this is where the tasks are automated, patterns are spotted, and outputs are generated at speed. But again, the AI and the local language models have no judgment, no ethics, no lived experience, no sense of consequence. It's purely functional. The machine does what it's told, right? So therefore, the AI is not replacing leaders, but what it does do is it exposes leaders who have never clarified their own thinking, which is why creating your own IP and creating your own models is so important. So functionality in Daniel Priestley's models only emerges when human meaning, human empathy, and machine execution are all aligned. Because the IP is giving the direction, the user experience is giving us the level of adoption, and the local language models are giving us the scale. And if we remove any one of them, we have problems. So IP without local language models, we get brilliant ideas stuck in that human bottleneck. And this is where many of us have been stuck for many years before the advent of AI. We had these brilliant ideas, but we couldn't actually get them out. We couldn't really understand what was going on with them. Local language models without IP means we can get fast nonsense. And how many of you have put stuff into an AI model only just to get complete garbage out? Or if the user experience is missing, then we've got unused potential existing in the system. But when we get everything together, work gets done, value is delivered, and humans are freed up from this really boring grind of doing really repetitive jobs, filling the widgets, and we actually get to do so much more. So if we were to divide it down, then what's very clear is that humans add this vitality. We create the intellectual property. We shape the user experience. We decide the ethics, intent, and direction. So, the wisdom and the courage. And then we add the judgment and the temperance at the end. Whereas AI is doing all the bit in the middle. They're executing, repeating, optimizing, and scaling. And so for any leader, I would say if you are trapped in functional tasks, then you are doing the wrong thing. So what do leaders need to do next in order to be successful in this AI world? We've got to stop doing replaceable work. If someone else, AI or human, could do that particular task tomorrow with no loss of results, it's not your unique contribution. So you might want to reflect on what you're still clinging to doing because it feels important, but it isn't. What we need leaders to do is amplify their vitality work. We need leaders to focus on vision shaping, team energy leadership, narrative and meaning creation, market cultural influence and strategy, initiation and closure. These are the things that distinguish you as a leader and not as a task doer. And I'd like you to reframe your role in the organization and think of your role as an architect of energy and direction, a catalyst of contribution, and a steward of momentum. Not, as many of you I think perhaps still are thinking about your role, as a manager of functionality. Because remember, AI is your partner, it's not your replacement. So what does this mean? It means high-performing teams of the future will be designed like living systems. Humans are going to lead the energy, the trust, the meaning, and the direction, and AI is going to handle the execution, the repetition, and the scale. Which means that leadership is shifting from doing to designing, from managing tasks to stewarding energy, and from controlling to creating conditions. So you might want to reflect on these questions. Where is your team stuck in functionality? Where is vitality leaking out? And what work are humans still doing that AI could free them from? Because for every functional task that as a leader or a human we cling to, it's where we lose vitality in the system. So the future of teamwork isn't human versus AI, it's human vitality supported by machine functionality. So let's create a vision of what leadership looks like in 2027. Humans curate meaning, not execute tasks. Leaders ask strategic why questions. Organizations design for flow, trust, and adaptability. And AI is powering functionality so humans can focus on vitality. So I'd like you to imagine a world where teams run on shared energy, where status is tied to contribution, not output volume. And humans and AI amplify each other's strengths. So my invitation for you this week is to try one simple experiment. Choose one functional task to automate, delegate, or redesign, and reinvest that time into one vitality activity. And that could be a deeper conversation, making clearer decisions, having a braver stand against something, or rebuilding trust where it's diminished. Because teams don't need more efficiency, they need more life. And that is the work that only humans can do. So as we draw this to a close, just a reminder that AI won't replace humans, but it will replace humans who confuse execution with contribution. And our job isn't to compete with AI, our job is to design the system that AI runs on. Because the leaders who thrive won't be the most technical. They'll be the ones who know where to place human vitality and where to deploy machine functionality. Because remember, burnout isn't a personal failure. It's a leadership design flaw, and vitality is what fixes it. So I really hope that you've enjoyed some of those thoughts about AI and vitality versus functionality. And I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this because I think this is a big conversation that we'll be developing more of as we go throughout this year. So see you next week when we have another amazing guest joining us on the podcast. So until then, I'm wishing you a really prosperous 2026. Hope all this amazing stuff comes true for you. And I can't wait to see you next week. Okay, bye-bye.